It really gives me a great pleasure to meet you all, and I'm so happy that also here in this room are people not only online but also on site. Thank you very much. I'm seeing my colleagues and presenters on this video screen, so I'm sometimes turning my head to that direction. My name is Nicola Moczek. Me and Barbara Kieslinger, she's also here. We are the chairs of the session. Thank you so much for coming. Barbara, would you just like to say hello?
Yes, hello. I just wanted to say a warm welcome also from my side.
Thank you so much. Imagine that this session had the most submissions. There were 20, so this was very challenging for us, for Barbara and me, to make a choice. Fortunately, we were able to convince the conference team to give us 2 sessions. So we can today present 8 lectures, 4 in part 1 and additional 4 in part 2. But we would like to explicitly invite you to look at the posters as well, because they were created by all the other colleagues whom we could not select for the personal presentation. So I'll begin to give you just a short overview. I'm sorry, where's my, this one? This is part 1. Each presentation will not last longer than 10 minutes. Immediately after the presentation, you can ask questions for understanding. So you can chat with us and we'll try to give the answers to the presenters. At the end of each part, we would like to start a short discussion with you all. You can also write to Gesine, who's our community manager, in the chat, and she will help me and Barbara to present that. So I'd like now to move on to the first presenter, which is Dr. Sabrina Kirschke from Dresden in Germany. She's a senior research associate at United Nations University Institute for Integrated Management of Material Fluxes and of Resources, UNU-FLORES. Hello, Sabrina, are you ready? I see you. Hi. We don't hear Sabine. Sabine, please turn on your mic. We don't hear you now.
Now you can hear me, right?
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Yeah, I was just saying that I'm trying to share my screen and I hope it is working. Now, can you see my presentation? I think so. Good, because I cannot see you, but if I don't get a sign, then I think it should work. So thank you very much for the introduction and also welcome from my side. I'm presenting here today on the design and effects of citizen science projects in freshwater quality monitoring, the results of the global survey, and I'm presenting here the work of a teamwork from colleagues from UNU-FLORES and also the Technical University of Dresden. Our focus is on SDG 6, water, and more specifically on SDG indicator 632 on achieving good ambient water quality. And the background is here that we actually face a lack of water quality data on a global scale. And therefore, a couple of researchers and practitioners call for involving citizens in water quality monitoring, but it is somehow unclear to the community how citizens can actually benefit SDG 632. And based on that, our question is, how do different design factors of citizen science projects, such as characteristics of citizens and institutions, influence the project's results, such as the outputs, outcomes, and impacts? In terms of methods, we started with, first of all, setting up a database of citizen science projects in freshwater monitoring, because we think that there is not a global overview in this field. And we started here with a review of scientific literature, did some web-based search, explored citizen science networks and platforms, and also analyzed international projects such as Freshwater Watch, and also did some networking. And then in the second step, we circulated a survey on the design and success of the citizen science projects. And here we started with the design based on a systematic review of success factors, and this had also been published before by a colleague, Senor de Capdevila et al. This March. And based on that, we started with a co-design process for the survey, and this resulted then in about 50 mostly closed questions on an ordinary 1 to 5 scale. As a result, we have realized that citizen science is in fact a global phenomenon, and we realized that we have about 450 citizen science activities globally, which relate to about 200 projects and about 100 countries. But we have also seen that citizen science is quite unevenly distributed globally. And this map shows here the number of citizen science activities per country and considers all the 97 countries. And what we realize is that we really have a majority of citizen science activities in the USA. But even if we exclude the USA, we have quite an uneven distribution of citizen science projects. Here you see a number of citizen science activities in 96 countries, and we have here 1 to about 15 activities per country. We then circulated our survey within these projects, and we received altogether 85 valid responses related to 83 projects. And we were quite happy that we received so many answers. So for us, this was a success already. And also the large majority of questions had been answered. The answers represent altogether 27 countries, so less than in our total database, but it is rather representative for the basic population if you take a look at the different regions. And on average, we have 3 answers per country with a range from 1 to 40. And we all know that the US is the most important country here. And most of the projects had been ongoing, but many of them had also been finished already. So what are the results? I start here with the characteristics of citizens in these projects. And we have seen that in terms of the background for citizens, we have mostly middle agers, an equal gender composition, a rather well-educated citizens, and also mostly middle-class citizens. Citizens belong to the middle class. In terms of knowledge and awareness, we have seen that citizens rather have average prior knowledge before starting the citizen science activities, but on the other hand, environmental awareness is rather high. And in terms of motivation, we have identified various motivating factors. Environmental resources or addressing a specific local problem is most important, and also learning about science and nature and social interaction. What is less relevant is receiving tokens of appreciation. In terms of institutions, no surprise, NGOs and academic institutions are mostly responsible for the projects. Funding, also no surprise, is not that good. We have here the public and the non-profit sector that provide the funding, but the projects really highlight that project funding is not sufficient. And in terms of motivation, also no big surprise, data. So it's all about increasing the data set for projects, but also it's about citizen development, such as awareness raising and learning, and also improving water quality. And what is less important is, in fact, the political dimension. So actually really advancing political decisions, and also knowledge products have not been highlighted as much. Finally, in terms of process mechanisms, we took a look at recruiting mechanisms. And here we have seen that digital means are rather important for recruiting. And basically all citizens are accepted. Sometimes there are some acceptance criteria, but not that often. The projects use diverse training and technical supporting structures. And for data transfer, what is pretty important also in the field, web pages are more important than older tools such as post-mail or newer tools such as apps. And communication feedback had been highlighted a lot in the literature, and here we see that the tools are mostly used at an annual basis, but there is also some variety between the types of feedback and tools for communication. So face-to-face feedback, for instance, was more important than other forms of feedback, such as feedback forms. The results, I think for us the most important thing, were the results of the citizen science projects. The goals in general had rather been achieved. We have an average of 3.7 on a 1 to 5 scale, but there's some variation between the types of results. We assume here that the direct expected outputs had rather been achieved, With regards to the data, we have here the first few lines on spatial data, increasing spatial data, increasing temporal data, having qualitative data, having cost effectiveness, and also based on that, having good knowledge production is rather achieved. Whereas other outcomes and impacts are, not really achieved that well. It's also pretty good, but to a lesser extent. And this particularly relates to the political dimension. So advancing political decisions or engaging citizens in politics had not been as successful as the data gathering process, and also the actual betterment or improvement of the freshwater quality is also less well achieved. What are the effects of the different design factors on results? Here I have to say we are still in the middle of the analysis. We have quite a huge data set and try to go through it. But we have some first insights. We have, we think, based on the first view, that the design factors matter to different degrees. So when we take a look at motivation factors of institutions, these may be more important than the gender balance and or the gender distribution in the project. And we have here one example in this figure on the right-hand side on the connections between motivations of institutions and results. And the figure basically shows that if a certain goal, if an institution is particularly interested in a certain goal, then this goal is also rather achieved. But this particularly relates to the outputs, such as the data, but less to the further impacts, such as the freshwater quality improvement or the political advancement. We are also testing various hypotheses, such as the role of cumulative and complementary effects of factors, and therefore are planning, this is what I cannot present today, but we are planning to have additional correlation analysis and advanced statistical procedures, such as a factor and cluster analysis, to see if we identify different clusters of citizen science projects in the field of freshwater. So I sum up, can citizen science support monitoring SDG 632? I would say basically yes, because we have manifold projects in the field and these projects are rather successful. But on the other hand, design matters and has to be considered more carefully. And we also have two questions, and one of the biggest concerns I personally have is how can citizen science become more common in less developed countries? We have seen that the capacity challenges for water quality monitoring is really most important in developing countries. There we really have a data lack. There we have capacity challenges. But these are also the countries where citizen science projects are less common. How can we address this? And second, we are also interested, our freshwater team, are the results specific for SDG 632, or can they be transferred to other SDG indicators or similar in other SDG fields? And with this, I would like to close. I thank here all the contributors, the team at UNU-FLORES and TU Dresden that worked on this project. And I thank you for listening and look forward to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabrina, for this very interesting talk. And I've seen a lot of questions popping up in the chat. And I just give you a short information about that are many people asking for a publication of your results or your talk. Maybe you can just give us into the chat your links. And additional, there was a question by Mohammed. How and with whom did you co-design the survey questions? Could you ask that?
Well, I think the students would be better in answering these questions. So the design of the survey was really based, first of all, of a literature analysis, and I will soon put the results of the literature analysis in the chat. Based on that, we had a first draft of a survey, and then we circulated in a team of students, because this was part of a study project, and then this specific survey was then circulated amongst eight different experts that represent different types of expertise. So we had, for instance, survey experts in there, but we also had freshwater, we addressed freshwater quality monitoring experts. So it was quite a diverse team. Also, we tried to have represent people from different regional areas. And I can also send a list of the experts that supported us here. Based on that, we had 2 or 3 revision rounds, and then finally we managed to circulate the survey.
Thank you very much. So a lot of questions are still answered in the chat, but maybe you keep on discussing there. But I would love to hand over to our next speaker, which is in Estonia. And I'm happy to say hello to Carmen Kilvits. She's in Tartu. She's a master student at Estonian University of Life Sciences and Environmental Management and Politics. Hello, Carmen. I see you here, over there, and now there. Perfect.
Hello, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the conference. So I'm here with Monica, who is my supervisor, and who will help me later on answer some of your questions if you have them. But right now I'm going to present my bachelor thesis, which was about the effectiveness of participation in environmental citizen science projects, and we focused in the situation in Estonia. So why did we choose this topic? Was because we find that participation in citizen science is increasingly important research topic, because the concept of participation can be understood differently, as well as citizen science overall. And research on volunteer participation patterns and arrangement of participation, it enables us to detect problems in current citizen science projects and suggest ways to address those. However, most of the research on participation is focusing on West and Central Europe. So there are only a few studies about Eastern Europe, but we think that Eastern Europe can provide interesting cases because of the history and increasing number of the citizen science projects. So the aim of this study was to provide an overview of the arrangement and the reach of engagement in the example of environmental project of citizen science held in Estonia. And we asked three main research questions. What are the goals of the selected projects? What type of participation prevails in these projects? And which are the opportunities that exist to improve participation quality? So we did a qualitative multiple case study, and we chose out 9 citizen science projects. The main criteria about choosing the project was that the project managers themselves had to use the term citizen science in their project website. And in the data collection, we used Kieslinger's et al. Citizen Science Evaluation Framework, which was really useful for me because I'm new in this field, and this framework was really great and useful to find some great questions that help me understand the management and reach of engagement in citizen science projects. So we used those great questions and did 9 interviews with project managers and searched for additional information from project websites. And in data analysis, we determined the type of the projects. So later about that. Here you can see the 9 projects, 3 of them strawberries, the Baltic Sea project and citizen science project for students on air quality are international, but we focused how they are working in Estonia. And what we found out was that the project managers mentioned mainly 3 goals: collecting data about environmental change, mapping species distribution, and improving environmental education. And when we are looking at these projects and these goals, we see that they can mainly support 4 SDGs, quality education. Many projects are focusing on students and searching ways to improve citizens' environmental education. Secondly, sustainable cities and communities. Here are a great example, the noise level project in Tallinn or students' project on air quality. Then Life Below Water, which is mainly related to the Baltic Sea project, and the project where the goal was to map species distribution are mainly supporting the SDG Life on Land. So they are collecting data for this SDG. So in order to compare all of these projects, we choose out 3 well-known typologies and found that all of these projects are quite similar in their nature. They are mainly contributive projects and investigation projects where citizens are engaged in data collection from physical environment. And they are mainly using crowd building strategy, which means they are doing public campaigns to find volunteers and not so much focusing on already existing communities. Which leads us to the next slide, where you can see the recommendation for project managers. One great way to improve these analyzed citizen science projects is involve already existing communities. For example, in Estonia, we have many environmental NGOs which have the same interest as those environmental citizen science projects. So working together or doing a collaboration will help to increase the number of participants. Another thing that the managers mentioned a lot was to pay more attention to the recognition of participants, and they admitted that they are not doing it right now because the projects are so new or young, or another thing that the project don't have enough money for that. So the citizen science funding is also a really important topic. So we hope that this study helps to understand the nature of various citizen science environmental projects that are held in Estonia. And those given recommendation will help to improve the projects. Maybe one limitation about this study is that it's mainly based on project managers' opinions. So in the future, it is necessary to study what are the expectations and visions of citizens and scientists and policymakers. And another thing that we are thinking that it's necessary to develop a network for Estonian citizen science projects. So so it will be more, the field will be more clear here in Estonia for all the parties. And for citizens, it will be easier to find projects which interest them. So this is it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Carmen. And I think it's so exciting that we have Barbara with us. Carmen was referring to her framework, and maybe because I don't see any questions in the chat right now, I would hand over to Barbara. Maybe she would like to comment or ask or add something to Carmen.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Carmen. It's interesting to hear also that the framework was useful. It was actually developed by me and other colleagues, especially Teresa, from who is also, I think, listening in this session from ZSI, and also with colleagues from the BOKU, from the University of Applied Sciences in Austria, and with Letta and Annette, I think, you know, from, I guess you know them. So I'm just curious to see, have one question. You said that they are not relying on existing communities. So do you mean to say that there have already been existing communities, and instead of addressing those, they were looking again for other people to engage, while there would have been the chance to already include more existing communities?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I find it as well. So I think it is for them will be easier to focus on already existing communities, but all the managers that I talk with, they said that they are doing campaigns and they want to find people that are interested in their project. So yeah, they only few projects are focusing right now already existing communities.
Thank you so far. Let's turn over to our next speaker and have a small discussion at the end of all. So now, so it's like the European Song Contest. I'm handing over to France, near Paris, Arpajon, to Laura Fallou, and I'm happy to have you here, Laura. You are a socialist at the Euro-Mediterranean Seismic Center, and you've got a very interesting topic for us. Oops. You're I don't, yeah, now I'm Laura, please try to share your, yeah, I see that you share your screen. Yeah. Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go. After Estonia, I'm taking you to Haiti actually, so that's a great trip. I'm going to talk about the TeRRIFICA Project. So let me go to the next slide. Yes. So the TeRRIFICA Project is a citizen seismology project in Haiti. It is led by a team of researchers in both seismology and social sciences. And can you hear me well? Yes. Okay. And so the starting point of the project was in a way, the 2010 earthquake in Haiti that you may know was a devastating earthquake. What is less known is that at the time there was a real lack of seismic sensor in the country. And from this lack of sensor, there was of course a lack of scientific knowledge about the seismic risk. And if there's a lack of scientific knowledge, there's also a lack of seismic risk culture. This is also in addition to the poverty level and the fact that there is a lot of other hazards in the country, so people had other concerns than seismic risk. What we tried to do was to use Raspberry shakes, so a new technology that came up a few years ago. The Raspberry shakes are small seismic sensors, and they are low-cost seismic sensors. So that was a great opportunity for us to first collect more seismic data in order to complement the national seismic network, but also to consider citizens not only as data providers, so that, but also to engage with them. So we wanted to see if installing this Raspberry Shake in their houses could actually raise their interest and their knowledge about earthquakes, not only in terms of science, but also in terms of risk. So this project actually falls into two SDGs. One is the 4th, so education, and the other one is 11, sustainable cities and communities. So regarding the methodology of the project, we installed 10 seismic sensors at volunteers' house or offices. So you can see them on the map here. So we tried to cover the whole country. We also created a dedicated website for seismic data visualization so that the host could see their data of their sensor, but also that the general public could get information about earthquakes happening in Haiti. We also translated the LastQuake app. So LastQuake is a crowdsource-based seismic information app. So we translated in Creole, in the local language, so that they could access information, but also provide some if they feel an earthquake. And finally, we found out that WhatsApp is one of the main, let's say, social media used there in Haiti to share information and to get some information in the daily life, but also in case of crisis. So we decided to create a WhatsApp group for the hosts so that they could get support from all sides in a scientific and technical way. We also designed an evaluation process. So we really need to assess the seismic network, but we also needed to assess the interest of the project among the whole population. And finally, we needed to assess the experience of the Raspberry Shake hosts. So first part was the assessment of the seismic networks. So here you've got the map of all the earthquakes we detected through the seismic sensors based on Raspberry Shakes. So you can see we detected 547 earthquakes in 1 year, which is a lot, but of course, most of them are small earthquakes that were not felt by the population. Still, it's important because it is a way to remember and to remind the people that, yes, there is a risk of earthquake. This seismic network could, of course, be improved if we had more sensors or if there was less seismic noise, but still, it is very efficient. We also assessed the interest among the population for the project. So we led a questionnaire. Unfortunately, given the situation in the country, we could not go in the streets and pass the questionnaire, so we had to do it online, which introduced some bias due to the digital device. However, we still have found interesting insights. So before the 2010 earthquake, risk awareness was really low. Now, people are aware of the risk and they are interested in learning more. However, they admit that they don't know that much about what causes earthquakes, for example, or how to be well prepared. We also got some insight about the voodoo and religious beliefs. So people would believe that earthquakes can be caused by spirits, for example. So we got a little bit insights about that. Of course, questionnaires are not the best ways to understand that. So we'll do more focus groups after that. Most interesting was the mistrust toward the governments and the journalists that was expressed in the questionnaire. People in Haiti do not trust the government to provide them information about seismic risk. So they still want better seismic risk and seismic information. And for that, they count on someone or an institute. Well, they want to that some Haitian scientists are trained in seismic risk. And they also want to install more sensors in Haiti, which is great because that's exactly what we plan to do. So that was really interesting in this questionnaire to understand that they had really a desire to get local solutions and sustainable ones. And finally, the last step was to do a qualitative analysis of the host experience. So we did, and we are still doing this, interviews with the host, the Raspberry Shakes host. And the goal of these interviews is to understand first the profile and the motivations of the host. So why are they doing it? But also their adoption of the Raspberry Shake and the way they use it. So we want to understand if it actually raised their knowledge, if they understand how the sensor works, or if they find it kind of magical. We also want to know if they detected earthquakes and if they feel better prepared. But we also want to assess the effect of this Raspberry Shake on their community. So for example, if they had the Raspberry Shake in their living room, maybe the neighbor came and asked questions. So does it have an impact on the whole community? And finally, we wanted to assess how we could improve the project in the future. So what we found in the first interviews we did is that volunteers participate for altruistic reasons. So they really want to improve risk reduction and science findings. They also showed a real interest in the project. There are a lot of quotes from the interviews expressing their interest, their surprise, their curiosity. So they really learned. And they were really amazed of all the earthquakes that happened. However, for the moment during the interviews, we had a sense that The Raspberry Shake for the moment has a low impact on the rest of the community, so they didn't tell much about the earthquakes and the Raspberry Shakes to their friends, to their relatives, and to other people of the community. That can be because they don't want to create panic among others. That can also be because the Raspberry Shake is in a hidden place, because if you want to reduce the seismic noise, you've got to put it somewhere where there are not so many people walking around, for example. And we could also support more the hosts in this kind of how to say it, like talking to each other about the Raspberry Shake. Finally, two other findings were that we need to take data literacy into account when we present the results and the data of the project. So, for example, some hosts told us that they could not really read maps, or that their community could not read maps. So that's not a good way to present the seismic risk, and that they would like to get the information on WhatsApp also. So we need to take the technology into account. So yes, here are just key findings to put it in a nutshell about what we found in the project. So yes, citizen seismology is a good way to complement the National Seismic Network, and there is an interest in IT for the project. But we need to support more our citizen scientists so that they can become ambassadors in their community. And just two findings for citizen science evaluation in general. So we really need to adapt to cultural factors and to the context. We also need to assess the interest among those who participate and also among those who don't and who could be potentially interested in the project. And finally, I think it's really important that we consider evaluation as a continuous process so that we can keep improving the project. Yes, so thank you to all the contributors, of course, and to you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Laura. And as we expected, some questions raised up about the engagement. How did you get in contact with the people? I just saw that one fourth of the people answered in Creole. So this must be a key to use the same language they are talking. But there are two questions. Which strategies did you use to engage the people, and did you offer some additional information to people what they could do to protect themselves? So the first question was from Nora and the second from Teresa Schäfer. If you can give a very short answer, because we want to have enough time for Alexander. And
the way we chose volunteers is just some of them were new, some people in the project. So there is, of course, a bias, but we wanted people who were motivated. So we just spread the word, and if people came to us, we would just provide the Raspberry Shake. So that was just basic volunteering. And the second question, yes, of course, the language is very important. That's what we really didn't wanted to do an online questionnaire, but we had to because of security reasons. We could not go into the streets to pass the questionnaire, so we did it online. And of course, there's a bias, but because not everyone did the questionnaire. Took the questionnaire.
And maybe you can answer the third question in the chat. It was about, did you offer some additional information to people what they could do to protect themselves from the earthquakes? But maybe you can chat that. And I'd like to hand over to Alexander Gerwe. He's also in Germany, not in Berlin right now. I'm sorry about that. He's in Kleve. He's professor for science communication at the University of Rhein-Waal. And hello, Alexander. Nice to meet you online.
Hi there. Thank you very much for handing over. I suppose in the Eurovision context, I should be saying France 15 points, 15 points. So thank you very much for the presentation. I'm presenting today, and I'm sharing my screen in a second on the TeRRIFICA project. We've been very fortunate that this is one of 2 reference projects chosen by the European Commission in the video, I think, which was shared, was it this morning or yesterday, on citizen science. That was the action project on ours. Let me just quickly share my screen. Again, same question. Does everyone see what's happening? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Well, I think the last 3 presentations were maybe a bit more from a bird's eye perspective with a project perspective. I think what I'm going to try and do is to see how can evaluation maybe go even deeper into the quality of the participatory process evaluation itself, and do something that sounds extremely boring. And these are the methodological details of how something like that is done from a social research perspective. But I promise I'll try to make this as worthwhile as possible. I've already been introduced here. Eric can't be with us today for logistical reasons, but you have our Twitter handles here as well, which I can also paste in the chat if you like. Then you got it here if anyone wants to respond directly. The TeRRIFICA project in general is about climate change mitigation and adaptation, obviously the role that citizens and stakeholders play in making that a more bottom-up process. We have 6 pilot regions from Belarus, where obviously at the moment there are a number of large challenges, if you want, which from a sociological perspective, as cynical as it might seem, might make that particularly interesting. But obviously the colleagues are very much in our thoughts at the moment. And we have pilot regions in Germany, in Spain, in France, in Poland, and in Serbia. The project itself aims to empower citizens and engage the regional stakeholders, particularly the municipalities, the regional and local stakeholders and policymakers, in climate action, to identify exactly those drivers and barriers to implement such action and to scale it up from these 6 regions we're describing, where we're piloting things, to basically all across Europe. Therefore, the project goal, which sounds familiar to most of you or most of us doing these SPOFs projects, of course, there are supposed to be roadmaps in the end and key performance indicators, but we really have, that is, I think, something that is quite unique with TeRRIFICA. We have a formative evaluation work package and approach, which I believe is even the largest work package, which my department has the honor to coordinate. And that is formative in a sense that we are evaluating the process itself throughout the project, feeding it back into the design and adjusting the research approach while we speak. We have 3 different dimensions in that regard. That's an output, a risk, and a process measurement. The output measurement is easily explained. I think that's quite a lot what we see in evaluation approaches across the spectrum, that we count activities. For example, in our case, it would be crowd mapping, pieces that people contribute to Google mashups or something like that, stakeholder workshops that take place, number of participants, the demographic characteristics of those participants as an indicator for diversity, which sounds like to be taken for granted. But on the other hand, we've also seen projects and presentations, like, let's say, me in a reviewer position, for example, where I see that there are conclusions made about diversity, but then in the actual evaluation, exactly those questions about gender diversity and ethnic diversity and educational levels are not asked. So if you don't ask those questions, then all you have is speculations, basically, by the people who watch the event. Then counting the numbers and the sentiment, so the more qualitative side of the tweets, the Facebook posts, and so on, is where we are trying to get a deeper understanding of the actual output of our project activities. Similarly, with the number and the relevance of the context and conversation. So we're also looking qualitatively into who's talking to whom about what, why, and how. And the risk perspective, the second element in the evaluation approach, is probably the easiest to explain. It's just about looking what's the likelihood of certain things to happen, what would be the severity of those things to happen, and what are the mitigation measures, and who would have the ownership of the mitigation of those measures. something that every project, I would say, should actually adopt. And I think it's also a core element in the Meantime in Horizon proposal, so it's nothing new to anyone. So the main thing I want to focus on in the next few minutes that are left is actually the third one, is the quality of the participation process itself. Just checking whether everything's okay. Everyone can hear me perfectly fine. Okay, just checking that I'm not talking into nirvana here. So bear with me. It's going to be a bit technical in the next few minutes. For example, that's where our expertise lies, is in social research methods and impact evaluation. We have decided to focus on that in the presentation because that, from our experiences, where often weaknesses are displayed and then often conclusions are drawn from research designs, which are not necessarily up to the highest standard of, let's say, survey design and so on. So one of the points is that the questions have to be formulated in an unambiguous way, that the participants understand the same thing when they hear the question. That means that those questionnaires actually need to be pre-tested and calibrated. Same goes for the response options and the scales. The questions should be randomized, and the response options should be coded and reverse coded, so that you avoid people clicking that they agree or disagree with something, so that that shows in the statistical analysis of the data that somebody has just basically clicked through very quickly. Same with demographics. It seems obvious, but then it's already the question, do the demographic questions come at the beginning of a questionnaire or at the end of the questionnaire? The empirical research experience from survey design, I think, has shown us very clearly how to do it. Same thing with age. You should not stratify age groups before you need to do that. So don't ask whether you are, let's say, under 18 or 18 to 35 or be above 35, because you don't know which strata in the end might make most sense statistically to analyze. Instead, ask people to write their age. So these are tiny little technical details, as I said, as promised, technocratic and boring as it seems. But if these things are done not according to methodological standards, then we're losing data, where it invites misinterpretation, or it limits the scope of what we can infer from those results. Some of those need to be open-ended, some of those need to be closed-ended. Same thing with gender, of course, that the time of male and female is finally over. You still see it. I just got a survey yesterday where that was exactly the choice, 50-50, so to speak. In our case, we captured then information about the events, which obviously is a closed-ended single response item for the respective project partner to enter that, whereas we need an open-ended one for the event title, because that might change even a few days before the event. We wanted then to understand, for example, what's the motivation of people to participate. And instead of just asking them here on the left, have you participated in similar events before, to have a connection, to also ask, why did you decide to participate in this particular activity? Obviously need also an other there, if those things captured, which allow you to do a more quantitative analysis, don't suffice. Even the best research design is never perfect. You never know whether your response options cover that spectrum. Then, of course, in the follow-up, even though that's not what we're talking about today, is how to quantify that qualitative data that comes out of the other. So all of these things are not as easy as it might seem by sending out a SurveyMonkey link and seeing what people have to say. The perceptions of the co-creation process itself, in that case, for example, we used a 7-point Likert scale, where you can have a long discussion how many points on the scale you should have and must have, and what are the arguments for and against it. And in that case, having an optional explanation for also negative feedback. Have my voices been heard? Have I felt empowered? And if not, why is that the case? To really understand what made the process effective, or what maybe not, to learn from that, and then to feed it back into the design of the next workshop or the next engagement that the project is conducting to basically improve in loops towards the end of the project. That's why it's formative, obviously. The attitude towards the co-creation itself, process itself, was measured, in that case here with semantic differentials, which again require good testing so that you have the a good understanding of what the response options represent, and of course almost always give people the opportunity to add, do you have any other thoughts or feedback about the project that you would like to offer? And that can be all kinds of things. And then the challenge in the end, in that case methodologically from data analysis, would be again, is it even possible to quantify that feedback at the bottom here? I'm almost through. The educational background is something that has been mentioned in previous projects as well, because obviously we want citizen science to be significantly more socially inclusive than it is at the moment. It is still too elitist. I mean, that's more of an opinion of mine, I suppose. But from the data we've seen from our own project, I would at least say it's an informed opinion, because we would like to open up to a much wider spectrum of people so that they feel included. So I think that's it's a bit more. Okay, so the other measurement instruments here for the participation process would be that we have, in this case here, multiple response questions on the subject area, where people can obviously select their area of studies, but then this is I think the screenshot we chose here as an example that you should always have also something like people prefer not to say. There can be all kinds of reasons for that, and not offering that immediately distorts the data, or at least bears the risk of doing that. Just a few glimpses of results, even though those are of course ongoing, because the project has still almost 2 years to go. Here are the perceptions of the co-creation process, where you, if you just look at the colors, so to speak, on the right-hand side, you can see that there are very clear results as to whether people were able, self-reported actually, to participate, and whether their contribution was valued. But you also see that in other cases, the distribution is more telling, that sometimes the results are clearer than in other cases. And then if you look into the qualitative side of when people tell you why that might be the case, we have learned a lot, and we are learning a lot about our own work. It's a very reflective process, if you want. You have to be willing to self-criticize your own activities on a permanent basis. This here is an example for attitudes towards the co-creation process, where again, people could get their feedback as to how they see it. So much for an overview as to how we've worked, what the outcomes were. The idea was to emphasize the importance of methodological rigor in doing that. Please don't hesitate to contact me personally for any questions. Otherwise, I suppose we still have a bit of time for discussion. I hope I'm still in time. Thank you very much for listening so far.
Thank you very much, Alexander. And as you all have heard, it was all about the quality of participation.
I think the colleague is still muted.
I'm muted? No? Mute? No. So it was.
If you wish to hear us.
I can hear you speak.
Okay, I can't. Sorry.
Can somebody hear Nicola? We can hear you. I can hear you.
Hello, Kesselhaus.
At the end, some technical problems. So it was about the quality of participation processes in different countries on different levels, from methodology to planning to designing a project. And I'm sorry that we don't have so much time to discuss it, but I would love to have one last question to Alexander, but I don't see anyone. So I would love to ask you four presenters, just to give a like this or this. How much psychology do you see in this process of participating and engaging with the public? How much do you rate how much the projects need? Can you Can you follow me? Do you okay, I see Sabrina is like this. Okay, Carmen, what do you see? How much psychology do you see in your? Because I, as a psychologist, maybe I just heard it. I heard so much information about feedback, about communication, on raising awareness, on sharing results and getting into contact. And I think this are typical psychological topics too. So this is what we, as some of you are sociologen, I can't say that in English. So, and so I think there's a lot of social science in this project and in this knowledge. And I love that you share this with us. So, Carmen, do you think there's some in it? Yes, okay.
May I?
Okay. Sorry to be so rude now, but I have
Nicola, do you hear us? Laura also would like to say something. Can you hear us, Laura?
I just wanted to say, we were thinking about the future of the project and what we should study furthermore. And I think one of the topic was studying more psychological point of view, but also maybe the economy point of view, like could we give incentive, like economy incentive, or I don't know. So there are much more than sociological survey to do, of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean it's a social science are great. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much to see you here in part 1, but I would love to invite you to part 2. Then Barbara and me are switching the roles. Barbara will start at 4:15, but you have to change the session room to get to our part 2. Barbara, do you want to say something, or is it all clear?
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicola, for guiding us through this session. I just wanted to say that the next session on evaluation is going to be as exciting as this one. Yeah. So I invite everyone, of course, to still join us for the next one as well. And if we will have time in the next one, it will be similar. We will have again 4 people presenting what they submitted for this conference. And we also asked all our presenters to give us an input on the main challenge and the main possibilities, opportunities for evaluation in citizen science. So if we have time in the next one, we can also still bring back the discussion on these issues. And I think we already touched upon some of those, but it would be also, if we have time, nice to come back to that. So thank you very much for the moment. And then we will see you again in the next session, hopefully.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.